Hello there. Welcome to Retcon 2024. As you see, we have a few talks lined up today, and we've got one of my best friends here, Jason Whiteley, and he'll tell you about all his music that he's made in his games, and hope you enjoy his chat.
Hi, everyone. Right, where do we start with this one? I feel like an old man now. So, my journey with sound started when I was about 9 years old, and my parents bought me a little cheap electronic keyboard, and I used to copy the soundtracks from the movies and start playing the theme tunes. But they didn't take it seriously. They just thought, oh, he's just fiddling around. He's not going to go very far with that. And as the years went by, they started buying me these little computer games, little LCD ones, little pocket-sized ones. And I would start copying the music off those. And then we got to the era where the computer started to come into my life, which was the ZX81. And I started learning to program on these machines, very basic stuff, nothing too complicated. And then I had a very good uncle who was a computer programmer, and he used to lecture at a college. So he said to my mum, he looks like he's quite interested in all of this. Let's let him come along and sit at the back and see how he gets along. So I'm now 10 years old, and these people are 16, that kind of age mark. And I'm at the back, and I'm just paying attention to what they're saying and trying to learn. And he noticed that I had something going, so he kind of paid a lot of attention to my skills at that time. So every Christmas he'd start bringing me books to learn about programming and music, and the wheels started to turn. And then we got to Commodore, a Atari 600 XL, because my parents wouldn't buy me the Commodore 64. They said it was too expensive. So I felt a little bit left out, because everyone in the school had the 64, and there was a little tiny club of us Atari 600 XL guys, and the games on that used to take forever to load. Tapes were mega long. Commodore 64, a tiny amount of tape, and I just felt like I was at the back of the queue. Anyway, my dad bought me a bigger keyboard because he thought my interest was getting to a point that he started to pay attention. And I started writing more music at home and thought I was getting quite good at it. Started doing my A-levels, and the years were going through. And I would read through the magazines. There was a computer magazine called Popular Computer Weekly, which was about 60 pence or something like that. And I would see stories about Amstrad, Lord Sugar, as he's now called. And so my association with people like that goes back from a long way, before the realms of The Apprentice, which we now see him in. Anyway, I saw a few names flash through these magazines, like Rob Hubbard and some big kings of the game. And I thought, wow, I'd love to do that as a job. That would be fantastic. And I thought, how do I even start with that? So it got to a point where I started buying games specifically with Rob Hubbard's name on the title. And I would emulate these music tracks and so on. And then I started doing my A-levels, and like I say, I got to about, where was I? I think I was about 17, 18, and I found out that Electronic Arts, known as EA Sports today, were based just down the road from my house. This is Slough. And I thought, there can't be a massive games company so close to my home. So I thought, oh, I wonder if they'll be interested in any of my music. So I put together a little demo tape, sent it in, and I thought, okay, let's see what happens. And then I got a reply, but it wasn't a good one. They said, your music is okay, but it could benefit from a few more variations, and it's a little bit too one-sided. So I took note of all of that, and I thought, whatever. I thought, we'll park that to one side. But I did take the constructive criticism, and I kind of carried on with my journey, which was to be a computer programmer. Anyway, I remembered at the bottom of the letter, the guy at Electronic Arts did say, if you do some improvements, please let me know and send another tape back. And I thought, oh, he's just being polite. Okay. So about 6 months to a year went by, and I put together another demo tape, this time sharpening my skills, really, really going for it. And then I was out, and then my mum said, you got a phone call from someone from EA, and he wants to have a chat with you. I thought, oh, okay then. So I had the chat, and they said, we'd like you to come in. So I was like, right, this is a bit nerve-wracking. So off I went, but the job that was on offer was for a games tester. I thought, okay, I'll take that. It's better than nothing. And that's what they will see in time, what I'm capable of. So I took the job as the games tester, and at that point, Electronic Arts in the UK was just a distribution center. All their programming and design was done in California. So I thought, okay, then I got to learn the ropes, and I was kind of going through. And then they said, you know what, it's got to a point where we need an in-house musician. I thought, well, would you consider me? You know, and they were like, show us what you've got. What can you do now? So I demonstrated that, and they were blown away. And they said, okay, we'll set you up with an office. I had my name on the door. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I became the first in-house musician for EA. I had a big task ahead of me, because trying to live up to the names of people like Rob Hubbard was just going to be, where do I go with that? And the first title I think I wrote was a game called Strike Fleet, which they gave me 2 weeks to write the soundtrack. And I was like, wow, that's not a lot of time. And I do remember that the amount of memory that they gave me to write the music was really small. They kind of prioritized the artists and the coders. They got the lion's share. And I was left with this little tiny piece of the cake to fit this soundtrack in, and sound effects, by the way. So, all right, okay. So I did that, and it went down really well, and they were sort of like, okay, this guy means business, you know, and the title went out, and it got good reviews. I felt a little bit comfortable. And I thought, at this point, all I wanted to do was meet Rob Hubbard, and I knew he had gone over to California, so I was like, how do I get to meet this guy? You know, I'm here in the UK, he's over there. I just want to see him. That was my primary goal, was to meet this guy. And I actually missed the part out, because before that, I went to California on holiday before I started at EA, and I asked if I could have a tour around the building. And they said, fine. And I said, I really would like to work for your company. So this is going back a section. And when I was in California, I said to my brothers, you've got to get me there on time, because I've got to make an impression, because one day I believe I'm going to be working for these guys. I was 10 minutes late. And yeah, 10 minutes late. And their response was really strict. I wasn't even there for an interview. I was just there to be shown around. And they said, well, we're a bit concerned that you want to work for our company and you're not even getting here on time. I thought, wow, these guys are really strict. So, okay, I took note of that, and I blamed my brother. And they kind of gave me a mock interview. They kind of put me through my paces to see what my interest was with EA, and because they knew that I wanted to work for them. And I kept looking over my shoulder, because I just wanted to meet Rob Hubbard. I was like, where is he? And they kept me in this room for 6 hours, so it was a long, interrogation. Then eventually they said, we'll take you to Rob Hubbard's studio, and you can have a look what he does. And I remember having my camera in my pocket, and I got to his room, his office. He turned around, and he was kind of like, who's this young kid's come to give me aggro? And I sat there, and I was just blown away by all the equipment, and I was like, oh, I'd done this variation of your music, a game called Thrust. I did this little bass line for him. And it was, for me, it was really complicated. I was like, wow, will he be impressed with that, I'd done that, and then I asked him if he could add something to it. Can you put something on top? And he just went like this. 2 seconds later, he just knocked out these amazing chords. And I said, can I record that? And it was almost like he wanted to say, is there anything else you want me to do for you? You pesky little child. And we took some pictures, and he was really polite with me. And I said to him, look, one day I want to be just like you. And he said to me these key words, and I'll never forget them. He said, one day this will be just like a normal job to you. And I was like, you've got to be crazy. There's no way in my life that would be a normal job. I don't want to say he was right, but it did kind of normalize over the years. But I got back and we caught up with the other part of the story. I got the job at EA, testing games. Then it led to me being a musician. The magazine started to pay a lot of attention to my work. I started to get a bit of a name for myself. Then they had a title called Desert Strike, which was already out on the on the Sega Mega Drive. Now, that soundtrack was done by Rob Hubbard, and they gave me an option. They said you can either do a rendition of his work, or you can go a completely different direction, which is a risk. And I thought, you know what? I love this guy. I want to be like him, but I need to make my own avenue. So I took the chance and made a completely different soundtrack. And when Rob Hubbard heard the soundtrack, I'd never forget that email because I have a copy of it to this day. He said, that was absolutely amazing. You blew the whole thing away. So he was proud of what I'd done. The soundtrack started to gather momentum and people started to write into EA and express their delight at the type of music that was now going on the Amiga. And people would journalists would turn up at EA just to interview me, and I had a lot of interviews in magazines, and it became a little bit of a celebrity type thing. It started to grow and grow and grow. Then the company started to diverse, and they made a machine called the 3DO. It kind of did something, and they gave me, it did something. it went somewhere, under someone's desk somewhere, I think. And I remember a guy called Trip Hawkins, who was the CEO of EA. He flew over, and I actually bumped into him in the bathroom. We were both washing our hands, and he was talking about this 3DO, and I was getting all excited about doing music for this machine because it was CD-based. And so one of the first ports that they did from the Amiga was a game called Powermonger, and that was a really good soundtrack again. But they gave me the full autonomy to orchestrate this soundtrack. And at this point, my studio was full of amazing equipment, just tons of stuff. And I went away and I wrote this soundtrack, and I notated it all through, and it became a big hit. And they played it through a company meeting. They had a big meeting one day, and they said, this is the soundtrack that our in-house musician has come up with. And they played it through the speakers, and I must admit, even for myself, that to this day, that's one of my favorites. It's on YouTube. It's a Powermonger 3DO rendition, and it's quite a powerful piece. And again, the momentum started to pick up. So, oh yeah. It was promised to be this big next thing, but it just went like that. Throughout that journey at EA, we had big players like Peter Molyneux, Bullfrog. They were just amazing with what they were doing at the time. Populous being a big title of theirs. And they were making a lot of waves with what they were doing. I do remember one incident I had, because I used to enjoy reading the reviews about my work, because I was obviously very young. And one reviewer, I don't know what magazine it was, his name was Stuart, and I did the soundtrack for Road Rash. And again, a small amount of memory to work with. The soundtrack title was relatively good. And this reviewer, he criticized my work, and it's the first time I'd seen criticism against what I'd written, and I didn't take it very well. I was like, oh, he said, this music is below average, and it really did upset me. So I was thinking, okay, I've got to learn to accept the good with the bad. Yeah, exactly, you know. And it kind of taught me that lesson, you know. And especially now with social media, people have to be aware of those things. It can go either way. And I took the criticism, and since then I've remixed the soundtrack on demand for a fan base in Japan. They kind of like that kind of guitar sort of sound. And then John Madden Football was another title that I'd written for. and that got good momentum as well. And they had a good programmer there at the time called Gary Roberts, who went over to California, now works in visual effects. And me and him were best friends, and we were like the terrible two of EA. We were very young, and we'd go out in all the company cars and, have lunch and talk about our next projects, and it was very, very exciting stuff, so it was a very good journey. That was the basis which catapulted me onto my music now, which is the mainstream music industry. So writing music for people like Pixie Lot and other names out there like Take That, doing like soundtracks for them, became quite a staple part of my life. But it was an unstable environment, not as stable as the game industry. Very, you're here doing a project one day, then you kind of moved on the next to something else. So I found that very unstable. I'm now, at this point in my life, making my way into movies. So you've got to watch this space. There's a good friend of mine who, actually there's a guy called Mark Knight, who's a very, very big name in the game music industry now. And he sent me his first demo tape when I was at EA on cassette. And it's always nice to see people like that progress with what they're doing. And the biggest success I've seen is I had a CV sent to me when I was at EA, and it was a guy called Henry Jackman, and he sent me this demo tape, and I rang him back to tell him that his work was really good, and I spoke to his father, very posh, and he said, "Oh, Henry Jackman's not in right now, he's out doing some composing somewhere." And that guy has gone on to do music for Wreck-It Ralph and many, many Marvel movies. So he's one of the great successes, and I still have his CV in my drawer. So it's been a great journey, a complicated one, but there's been some really exciting times, winning awards for my work and seeing the industry grow. And the retro side of things is always close to my heart, because games like, I remember, from Pac-Man to Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, going through to the 16-bit era of Bubble Bobble. Those of you might know those games. Those were always good fun to play. Gauntlet, games like that kept me up for hours, But it was always, for me, about the music. It was always, how do these guys get this music on these games? And, in the early days with the 64, you couldn't just go into a recording studio with loads of equipment and hammer down some notes and have that go on the game like you can now. Back then you had to stitch it all in with code. And that was the speciality, what separated games musicians from mainstream musicians. You had to have that ability. And I remember there was a point of, not jealousy, but the industry was growing at a rapid pace, and it was quite a unique market for me to be in the early years, because you had to have that programming skill. And as it was going along, it got to a point where the video games were outselling CDs. So that brought attention from the music industry, thinking, well, how are these guys selling more units than us? So they had this idea, which is very common now. So hang on, if we approach one of these games companies, with EA being one of the biggest, and we have one of our big artists and we clip them onto that game, that means we sell more units and their music gets out there. So we'd get a lot of people turning up at EA, with me being the head musician, coming to see me from the likes of Sony and other independent record labels. And it was a kind of a love-hate situation, because they were turning up to see me, and I was honored by that, but they were also turning up with artists who had a name in the mainstream music industry, and they wanted to put them on my games. That's the way I saw it. So, okay, we've got this artist here, everybody knows him, and this could be dangerous for me now, because it's opening up the floodgates for musicians to just come walking through the door. So it was received with mixed emotions by myself, but I had to show that I embraced it. So the FIFA soccer era came along, and that was when that kind of association really took off, and you had the likes of Robbie Williams and other big stars clipping their music onto these games, and people were familiar with those melodies, so it was an easy transition, and it meant less work, for the computer artists and musicians. So I thought, how is this going to work? So what you had to do was maneuver yourself into a position of being like a music director, where you could say, right, this is now my job to approve what music goes into these games and to still keep your hand in that arena. So that's where that swap kind of came along. And now it's very easy to write music for games, because you just, you go into a recording studio, they tell you the name of the game, you have a budget, you record it, you don't have to worry about memory anymore. That's a thing of the past. So you can make music to your heart's content, just keep going. And that's pretty much my story, unless you've got any questions you'd like to ask me at this point. I'd be happy to answer. Yeah.
So do you have any old retro systems and music software trackers or whatever that occasionally, and you still like to play around with?
Yes, Pro Tracker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, the love with that. Yeah, Pro Tracker I still use. I have it on my PC, and I have a Raspberry Pi, which has all my retro games on, which is like thousands of catalog games I can jump into. But I do still play with the Pro Tracker.
Yeah.
That's a good question. That was.
Great, you would have seen YouTube channels like to delve into how it's all done. I remember, like, as a 10-year-old playing these games, and occasionally they're playing around with Octobet or
Yeah.
whatever, and having no idea how it works. And now you can watch on YouTube and see, how it's all done.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is a great teacher of all things. It's, people have made careers out of learning, watching from videos, And the restrictions then, it's interesting you mentioned the Pro Tracker, because with the Amiga especially, it's 4-channel sound. The trick was to try and make it sound like it was more than 4 sounds playing at once. So you do what's called duplexing, where on one channel you'll have maybe the percussion and a few bass notes, make it sound a bit full. Then you go on to channel 2 and put your melodies in, then your lead line, and a few chords on the remaining 4th, and you juggle that around a bit. And that's what made Rob Hubbard very special. He was the master at that. So learning those techniques was a must for me if I was going to make my name. But yeah.
I saw Calvin Harris at the Brit Awards just a few months ago. He had an Amiga on stage with Octobet, which I think his brother wrote the manual for.
Wow.
I don't know if did you ever work with him or
No, Calvin Harris. Yeah, no. I mean, I see the name fly around over the years, and that's interesting that you had an Amiga on the stage.
on the telly.
That's mad.
There
Yeah.
was a song he did with, I'm not sure, there was a popular pop artist that he had. There was
Yeah.
Cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's been some great crossovers from the mainstream, and even more so now. We're in this era of gaming. But I think you'll all agree, or most of you will, that the fun that you get on the retro games can't be matched with these great graphics and stuff that we have now. It's different. It's you need to have a degree to play some of these games. But the playability of those games from that time, I don't think can be matched. And there was that game called was it Crazy Birds or something? Crazy Bird, not Angry Birds, where Flappy Bird, that's the one. And it makes me laugh because you have like people that were so focused on these great graphics, and that game came along, and people completely accepted it. Yeah. Yeah. And Minecraft is another example. I was thinking, wow, I cannot believe where that's gone, because it kind of came in at a time when graphics were doing all these amazing things. But look what it's doing, and it's just simple graphics. It's in a league of its own. So it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter how good the graphics look. If the playability is there, it's always going to win. It's always going to win. And I think that's what the youngsters are missing today, with all these flashy games. Well, yeah, there is. Yeah, well, I play it, but don't tell anyone. Oh, this has been recorded. Yeah.
Have you been involved in any of the orchestral, remix?
Yeah.
The recent stuff that's been on occasionally, I think there was a Rob Hubbard one not too long ago.
Yeah.
Have you been involved in any?
No, I saw that. I saw the BBC documentary which I'm just so glad that he's been given that respect. And he does have a book coming out, an autobiography, which I do feature in. So I tell some of this story about going to meet him and taking my own direction, and being that little insect on his shoulder before making my own name and getting my own respect. But yeah, Rob is still active, and long may that continue. But my association with him has been really, really good, and it did well for me. It was good grounding, and it's good to learn from someone like that. Absolutely. But the orchestral stuff, I did an orchestral version of the Powermonger theme with a Welsh Philharmonic, which I'm going to put out, so I'll make that available to everyone. I get asked a lot to do remixes of games like Road Rash, and there's a really good tune that I did for Space Hulk by the Warhammer. That's a big title, and that's I'm going to remix that because that will go down very well. That's going to need orchestration, so I'm looking for a team to put that together and get that out there. Cause I get a lot of demand for that, especially over from the Japanese shores. They can be quite fanatical. So yeah, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Do you ever have any young musicians come to you in the same way that you went to Rob Hubbard, or was the industry already kind of changed?
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. Still now, I give music classes and lessons, and I help people through their A levels and their degree. But I do get a lot of youngsters come in for inspiration, and they might drop me in a tag on Facebook, and I'll always give them time. I think that's important to help them along their journey. So yeah. Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
Do you ever say it will feel normal one day?
Yeah. No, I'm trying. I'm too scared to say that, because even though I know it's somewhat true, everything has a novelty factor. My dad even taught me that. And when I bought my first new car, he would look at me and say, one day it will just be normal. So I think everything does have a novelty factor, just different lengths. But I try to not see that one. I try to keep injecting myself with it.
It's magic, and you're enjoying it.
Yeah, that's right. No, you want to.
It never does, does it?
No, it's always fun to write a new piece of music. Yeah, definitely so. So they always say musicians die twice. Say the first time, Dudley Moore, great pianist Dudley Moore, as well as a comedian. He was the one that brought that line to my attention. He said a musician, they die twice. And he meant that in the sense of when you can't play no more, whether it be from arthritis or something else, then obviously death as we know it. And I always remember that. And I see older musicians slowing down and their fingers getting slow. My piano teacher, because I did all the grades and I did a degree in music, he taught me to write with my left hand. He said it will help your left hand play. So I became very good with my left hand through that experience. Yeah, he taught me a lot of good things. He was very inspirational to me in that sense. Yeah. Anything else anyone want to ask?
Have you seen the kind of growth in the chiptune industry that people do? They're taking Amigas on the road and taking C64s and literally doing gigs, dance gigs.
You're absolutely right. That is, yeah. So the chiptune sound, that kind of sound wave and the way that the sound is created has become a unique type of sound. And like you said, it's gone full circle because it is making itself present in a lot of modern dance tracks. And whereas before you'd get parents that would say, oh, turn that down, that's not music, it's now it's been embraced, which is great, It's
Can I make, there's a show in 2 weeks, Kickstart for Amiga, and there are 2 or 3 really good guys there. Would that be really showable?
okay. So I shall make sure I come then.
Yeah, no, it's just, I'm not really a gamer.
Sounds interesting.
I can't play music. I've got no reason to can't play. I do like the music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said earlier, a lot of people were buying games just for the music. That it was something that we. So yeah, Shadow of the Beast. Wow, that was inspiration for me when I heard that. Us musicians can be very competitive. you know, and reluctant to give praise, but I'm giving it all today for those that deserve it. So, yeah, the chiptune style of music is, much to my delight, has come back, and I've got quite a lot of unreleased stuff, which I will be putting out in the next couple of years. So you can watch that space for that stuff. It'd be good to go. You know, we've lost a couple of names as well. Ben Dalglish, one that's gone. Richard Joseph, another big inspiration of mine for many years. I remember working with him, and he did on the Amiga Chaos Engine, which was a great soundtrack. Then you had the Bitmap brothers, who introduced Bomb the Bass with games like Xenon, David Whitaker and Xenon, and then Xenon 2 was Bomb the Bass. And like I said earlier, that's when those guys started pouring in heavy, so I had to up my game and make sure that I was on top of it all the time, you know. Yeah.
Did you ever contribute to the demo scene? Like the
Yes. Yeah. There is a demo called the Pink Floyd demo. It was 5 discs long, and my music features. Yeah, my music features in that quite strongly all the way through that. Split Dimension was the name of the group that I was with. So, but that was on the Amiga. Yeah, I didn't jump in before that, but that was my main sort of stem, was that era. I remember having an Atari ST, and I thought that was a great machine until I went to a computer show at the Novotel.
Yes.
The Novotel, great shows, and someone showed me an Amiga there, and I felt deflated because I had this ST, and I thought, I had to convince my parents again. I said, Mom, I know you just bought that machine, but there's this machine now. And I had to earn it, so yeah, I made the jump. I didn't actually want to part with my ST, but she goes, you can't have both. So I had to sail it off as a private sale. The one era that Amiga struggled with music-wise was in recording studios. The ST was always dominant because of the MIDI connectors on the side. And I used to get a little bit upset with that because I thought, well, I had one of those. Now I've got this. But, you know, the Amiga held its own, and it's good that it's still around. You know, it's still doing really well. I did eventually get my 64, by the way. I'm in my story, after suffering the 600 XL for quite a while. So it went from 600 XL to the 800 XL to the Commodore 64, Atari ST 512, I think it was, and then the Amiga 500 with the expansion pack plugged in for good measure.
There is a debate, as I'm a bit of a Joe Minor fan, so there is a debate whether the chip in the Atari was better than the 64. And of course, I'll probably get my head kicked in.
Oops, yeah.
As a Joe Minor fan, I'll say, listen to music on both. So.
That's a big debate there.
I'm an Amiga guy, one knows that.
Yeah, I'm going to give a politician's answer and stay on the fence, not to upset anyone. So you're an Amiga fan as well, then? So yeah, it did really well, and it was around for quite a while until these beasts console. What was weird for me was I didn't see that cartridges were going to make a return. Because I remember when the Sega Genesis came out, I thought, why are we going backwards? Because we had the Atari 2600, which was cartridge. Then they died off. Then you had discs, 3.5, 2.5. And then they came back. And I just thought, yeah, you know, and what was worse for me was I used to love joysticks. Then these joypads came out. What's this? Where game? You know, what was wrong with just doing that? You know, just and then as the games started progressing and getting more complicated, you had like manuals that were going on forever just to do the moves. It's like playing Street Fighter. It's like, what's this combo? I just want to go left and right and up and down. Press the button. So yeah, I've seen a lot of changes, and long may the retro scene continue, and I'll be a part of it for a very long time. That's all I have to say. Thanks.